It is time for my 2024 Power 4 quarterback tier list. As I record this video, it is April, so that means it's spring game season. We're going to start to see a lot of these quarterbacks cook and go out there, and so I thought before we see any of that, I wanted to put it out there where I think every quarterback in the Power 4 plus Oregon State and Washington State stands at this point in the offseason. So we're going to take quarterbacks and we're going to put them into one of 6 tiers. We're going to put them in either the star tier, which is the top 1 high quality starters, star potential, average, below average, and not good. So without further ado, let's start with the top tier stars. And as you can see, quite a few teams who I think have star caliber quarterbacks on here. First, you have the Kansas Jayhawks. They bring back Jalen Daniels, who has really struggled to stay healthy with the Jayhawks. But when he's been healthy, he's been a superstar. And I think a guy that is going to get back, he's probably not going to see a ton of action in the spring game, or it's really a spring practice that Kansas does around this time of year. But really excited to see what he can do. When he's at his best, he's one of the best in all of college football. What about Quinn Ewers at Texas? I think he really had his best season of his college career so far last season and really shined throughout the year. And a guy that I think is not going to be in any danger of losing his job. I know people like to, generate the Arch Manning hype, but there's no losing this job if you're Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers is in a great spot. His weapons are getting better every day at Texas. And in year 1 in the SEC, I think he can really thrive. I don't think his numbers are going to regress all that much. Shedeur Sanders was very pleasantly surprising in year 1 at Colorado. Probably should have seen it coming, though. He was phenomenal at Jackson State. His numbers actually, I think, regressed a little bit from Jackson State, but still pretty great numbers. He threw for a ton of yards and had several just insanely good performances, especially with not a great supporting cast around him. So I don't think there's any reason not to expect him to be a star in 2024, especially as Colorado's tried to shore up some things like the offensive line. At Oregon, can you say who their quarterback is right now? That's what I thought. Most of you probably can. It's Dillon Gabriel, the former Oklahoma quarterback. Maybe some of you just said that and you're saying everyone knows who that quarterback is. Well, I'm sure there's some people that didn't know. But Dillon Gabriel, I think with the weapons he's got to work with, especially Tez Johnson and Evan Stewart, he's going to absolutely cook with the Ducks. And he's going to be a top-tier quarterback in college football as long as he can stay healthy. Last season at Oklahoma, I know that there was some injury concerns throughout the season that hindered his season a little bit, but I'm expecting nothing but an elite season under Dan Lanning, who's always had elite quarterbacks. At the University of Utah, Cam Rising is back for his seemingly billionth year with the Utes. Veteran status is something that is made fun of online for these players that are in their 7th years or whatever in college football. It's a huge advantage, though, especially when you're a guy that can play at Cam Rising's level. He is going to be a top-tier quarterback. He's a star when he's healthy. He had an entire season and off-season, now another off-season, to recover that knee, get it back to full strength. I'm hoping for the good of the sport that he's going to be back and healthy and really good. And so when he's healthy, I think he's in the top tier as well. At Georgia, Carson Beck. Carson Beck is such an interesting quarterback to me because can you tell me one thing about Carson Beck? I can't tell you one thing either. I know what he's like on the field. I know he's a great quarterback, but he is such a pedestrian non-personality off the field that I feel like it hinders his stock sometimes. People forget about him when you're talking about the best quarterbacks. He's phenomenal. His touchdown to interception ratio at Georgia has been great. He's been exactly the kind of quarterback. It's been a seamless transition from Stetson Bennett to Carson Beck. Then you've got Noah Fifita at Arizona. He was absolutely phenomenal as a freshman. Only expect him to get better. Even though there's been a change and shakeup in staff, he still has a great cast around him, and he still is thrown to Tetairoa McMillan. And then last but not least, in the star tier, we have Ole Miss's Jackson Dart. Dart fended off 2 guys that had a legit shot at winning that job last year, including Spencer Sanders, the former Oklahoma State quarterback. How about that? Jackson Dart really showed a lot of toughness last year and one of the key driving forces to their successful season. So I think he's the last guy and the cutoff for the star tier quarterbacks that I think are pretty much all locks to be among the best in the sport. Let's take a look at the second tier, which is high quality starters. Guys that I think are still really good and most likely by all accounts going to start at quarterback for their respective teams and probably be above average starters. They're just not quite at that star level. You start at UCF, you've got KJ Jefferson. I think the guy was a star at one point. He has really been marred by injuries, and at Arkansas, towards the end, you kind of saw a downtick in what he was doing. I like what he can do, and I like what he can do in a Gus Malzahn system. So I'm trusting him for 2024 to be a high-quality starter. At Tennessee, Nico Iamaleava. I think that he is a slam dunk high-quality starter, and I think he has star potential 100% in that offense. I think he's just as good, if not better, than Hendon Hooker. And in the same system, Heupel's going to cook with him at quarterback. It's going to be a much improved from what last season was. At Notre Dame, Riley Leonard is the new signal caller for the Irish. Best quarterback with the best offensive coordinator that Marcus Freeman has had at Notre Dame, and I think it's really going to pay dividends, and I think they're really going to be successful. You look over at Missouri, Elliot Drinkwitz brings back Brady Cook, and Cook, I think, absolutely established himself as a great starting quarterback last season. It was a put-up or shut-up season for him, and he absolutely put up. Georgia Tech, you've got Haynes King, one of the more underrated quarterbacks in the entire country, a guy that's a dual threat and a guy that really plays with the same chip on his shoulder that whole Georgia Tech roster plays with. Moving on in this tier, you've got Alabama with Jalen Milroe. I know a lot of people love Jalen Milroe. They think he should be in the Heisman contention. I see people all the time when they see this saying, "Ooh, are you going to apologize when he wins the Heisman?" I don't think he is. I think there's some glaring inconsistencies in his game. People are forgetting that he was on and off bench at the start of last season. He's a guy that I think is a firecracker and can make big plays happen for you, but he's too inconsistent, can't protect the ball effectively enough. In a staff change too, I don't know how that's going to affect him either. So I'm conservatively putting him at quality high starter, which is still great. A high quality starter is a great place to be. It's where Ohio State is with Will Howard. I think it's an upgrade over Kyle McCord. At NC State, you've got Grayson McCall, who I think is a fantastic veteran leader for the Wolfpack. I really think he can thrive. Penn State has Drew Aller. People think he has a star ceiling. I'm not sure. I haven't seen it yet. He needs to do that if Penn State wants to make it to the next level. I'm just going to say high-quality starter. I feel like Aller does get more slander than he deserves, people acting like he's genuinely bad. He's still a net positive starter overall, and we'll see what they're able to do. At Virginia Tech, they've got Kyron Drones, who really came into his own last season. I think he's bound to just get better and continue to improve with all the continuity around him. And then there's Cam Ward at Miami. Very excited about the prospect of him being with the Hurricanes. A ton of talent around him as well. There's no reason he can't be one of the best guys in college football. And then another really underrated quarterback, Garrett Green at West Virginia. He is rated very highly by a lot of the advanced metrics out there that tell you this guy is borderline a top 10 quarterback, which is crazy stuff to say because they really wanted to bench him for Nico Marichal at the beginning of the season. But guess what? Doesn't matter. Garrett Green has just stepped up and he's become the guy at West Virginia. So excited to see him play, but he rounds out the tier of high quality starters. This tier fits a lot of quarterbacks in college football. It's the star potential category. Guys that have a big name, have a ton of stars next to their name, maybe have shown little flashes but aren't established enough yet to really even be considered for those top two tiers because it would almost be an overreaction or too overzealous. I think Nico Iamaleava is maybe the only guy I made an exception for because I'm that certain that he's going to be great. But we start with LSU's Garrett Nussmeier. We just haven't seen enough of him in real live games. He was behind Jaden Daniels. I really think that he's capable of a lot. He lost his offensive coordinator, Mike Denbrock, who goes to Notre Dame. So we'll see what happens. I don't anticipate a big drop off there for him and his production. I think he could be a star. At Duke, you've got Malik Murphy. He's a guy that was behind Quinn Ewers at Texas. We saw him in some little spurts. He's still a very raw guy with a ton of talent. And at Duke, year one, Manny Diaz, what's going to happen? We'll find out. A guy that I think could definitely break out into the scene. At USC, you've got Miller Moss. He already showed in the Holiday Bowl what he's capable of. Any quarterback in a Lincoln Riley system could be put into this tier, star potential. At Nebraska, Matt Rule finally has a guy in Dylan Raiola that he wants at quarterback, and he could be the right guy. We've seen Matt Rule do some crazy things with some quarterbacks that others might not be considered to be very talented. At Texas A&M, it's the former five-star Connor Wegman. Wegman has been a guy that has been a little inconsistent, a little injury-prone thus far, and he got injured last season, which was tough to see, but I'd love to see him healthy, love to see what he could do under Mike Elko. At Kansas State, guess what? The Wildcats have a young guy named Avery Johnson. I think he's shown enough that I'm convinced he's going to be a star at some point in his career. I don't know when it's going to be. This next year, he might just have to settle for a high-quality starter. Maybe he's still a little inconsistent with his arm. I think that's going to come as he matures and as he gets better. At Oklahoma, the Sooners losing Dylan Gabriel. Well, guess what? It's not really much of a loss for them. They have Jackson Arnold, a guy they really trust. He started in the bowl game. He looked pretty dang good. Star potential for sure. Michigan State has a guy in Aiden Childs that Jonathan Smith brings with him from Oregon State. I think he could totally be a star, and based on what I've seen, I think he will be eventually as well. I put him in the same tier as Avery Johnson, of a guy that I'd say is a surefire future star in college football. It's just a matter of whether or not they're able to put it together in this season or maybe the next season. At Clemson, Cade Klubnik looking to show that last year hopefully was maybe a fluke with his inconsistencies and maybe settle into this Garrett Riley system a little more. Klubnik's been pretty disappointing overall, but still a guy that I'd say has the upside of a star. At Texas Tech, it's Behren Morton's team. Behren Morton is getting the chance that he long wanted with Texas Tech, and I think that he's a guy that could totally make that next step. I don't know if he's much of a slam dunk as some of these other guys I've talked about, but I've heard great things about Behren Morton, and I know that he's backed by Red Raider Nation. Virginia, Anthony Colandrea, one of the most inconsistent firecrackers of a quarterback in the entire country last season as a true freshman. Every play was going to be either a 20-yard gain or a turnover. Really exciting to watch entertainment-wise, but star potential-wise, there's something there as well. I think definitely a boomer bust guy. At Arizona State, you've got Jaden Rashada. Rashada is going to be battling out Sam Levitt, another former 4-star, but either guy, if they win that, I put them in the same category if they win the starting job, because Kenny Dillingham is a quarterback whisperer and one of the guys that rebuilt and retooled Bo Nix at the Ducks. So I really think Rashada or Sam Levitt could be great with the Sun Devils, and that's a case where whichever quarterback wins that job, I'd put him in the same tier. At South Carolina, if you heard some buzz, it's probably been about Lenora Sellers. They all believe he's got next, and he might. He might be the type of guy that can flip a season with the Gamecocks. Kentucky bringing in another transfer quarterback. It's Brock Vandagriff. Again, we haven't seen enough to know if he's high-quality starter or a star, which I put him in the star potential category. We'll find out. At Cal, you've got Francisco Mendoza, I believe, not Fernando Mendoza. I always say that wrong for some reason, but that's a guy that's shown a lot too, but a little inconsistent. I would liken him a little bit to Anthony Colandrea, a lot of boom or bust potential, and that leaves us with the Arkansas Razorbacks, the final team here. They have former Boise State quarterback Taylen Green, which is really intriguing. I'd like to see how they use him in this offense, but I think he could do something with Arkansas. I'm intrigued. So this takes us to the average quarterback tier. These are guys that I think are just going to be pretty average. Nothing necessarily special. At Washington, you've got Will Rogers, which would have sounded absolutely blasphemous a couple years ago, but I think he had inflated numbers in that air raid offense. I don't think it's going to be anything too crazy. You've got Josh Hoover at TCU. He was able to take over after some injuries. He did a respectable job at quarterback, but don't think anything crazy. Same with Illinois, Luke Altmaier. He's a guy that had some flashes and not even sure if he's going to be the quarterback there. There's Paddock as well, a guy that could definitely vie for that job. At Indiana brings in Curtis Rourke from Ohio, which is an intriguing addition, and we'll see. We'll see if he's able to step into his own. Syracuse has the very notable Kyle McCord, a polarizing quarterback to say the least. As I continue in the average tier, I'm probably going to say a lot of names that you probably haven't heard of in a while. Like, what about Maryland? They have MJ Morris, the former NC State quarterback, a guy that was a little inconsistent. At North Carolina, they have Max Johnson, the former A&M guy. Baylor, Daquan Finn, who was pretty good at Toledo, but we've yet to see him at a power level, how he can consistently perform. At Florida State, it's DJ Uiagalelei. There's no denying that it's been hot and cold in his career, so I don't know if I can trust him to be an above average guy throughout the season, and I don't think it's fair to say he has star potential still, because I don't think he does have star potential. At Purdue, you've got the guy that transferred from Texas, Hudson Card. Texas is just a quarterback factory for other teams right now. Minnesota has Max Brosmer from New Hampshire, a transfer that went under the radar. Iowa State has Rocco Becht, who is a young quarterback, a little inconsistent last year. He's only going to get better. I thought about putting him in star potential, and as I say it now, maybe I should have. Michigan going to have Alex Orji maybe, but so many other options in that quarterback room, and maybe they go back to the portal. That's a team that's rumored that might be thinking about doing that in the spring window. The Florida Gators with Graham Mertz, who put together a pretty good season that silenced, I think, a lot of doubters about what he is capable of. Louisville with Tyler Shuck. Shuck is a guy that's been an absolute journeyman. He's struggled to stay healthy. That factors in a little bit here. When healthy, I do think he could be a plus-level quarterback, but for now, with all the concerns that have been pretty consistent over his career, I'll put him in this average tier. At Boston College, Nick Castellanos, which I believe it's actually Thomas Castellanos. I just said Nick because that's the one from the NFL. So Thomas Castellanos at Boston College, a firecracker as well, little inconsistent. I'd say he's an average quarterback as well. Of course, the teams I didn't mention already, Preston Stone at SMU, a guy that's been there, done that. We'll see how he performs in the ACC. And at Washington State, a couple of guys that could still win that job. It's still kind of up in the air. Eckhouse, the transfer, though, probably who I would favor to win that job for now. All guys that I think are going to be pretty average. And here we go. We've made it into the below average tier. Some teams and some fans aren't going to like to hear this, but I'm here to just lay it down for you. At Auburn, Peyton Thorne is a below average quarterback. He cannot throw the ball very well. He's a good runner, but last season he had several games for under 100 yards. In a system under Hugh Freeze, that's unacceptable. At UCLA, Ethan Garbers is likely to be the man. That is not an above average or high level quarterback. At best, he's a decent system quarterback. I don't know how good the system is at UCLA. At Rutgers, Gavin Wimsatt. I love the fire. He's another guy that's pretty good at running the football. Throwing the football, not so much. You look at his numbers, the way he performed last season, it was pretty inconsistent. It's not necessarily something that tells you this team's going to be great at quarterback next season. At Wisconsin, Luke Fickell still trying to turn things around there. They have Tyler Van Dyke, the former Miami quarterback. That might sound like a blast from the past. Van Dyke has just really struggled to stay healthy and hasn't been able to recapture the magic from that one really great season he had. So I'm going to say below average. At Oregon State, they've got 3 quarterback options. They're all pretty below average. They've got an Idaho transfer in Giovanni McCoy, Missouri transfer in Jabari Johnson, and Ben Branson. Don't know who's going to start out of those 3 yet. Whoever does, pray for the Oregon State offense. It could go back to some dark times for them, offensively speaking. Houston is a team that brings back their man in Donovan Smith, who could be the guy. They also brought in Zion Chris, who could challenge him for the job. At Mississippi State, they're going to bring in Blake Shapen to be the man for Jeff Lebby and company from Baylor, but I don't know how I feel about that. Blake Shapen couldn't even lock down the job. He was pretty disappointing this last season there. At BYU, Jerry Bohannon, who actually is a guy that lost the starting job to Shapen at Baylor, but now he winds up at BYU after a stint at South Florida where he also lost the job. So I think you're going to have to say he's pretty below average as well. And then at Stanford, Ashton Daniels, a guy you don't hear a crazy amount about, and that's because he's probably going to be below average. We'll see if the freshman quarterback gets a shot at Stanford. They just brought in a 4-star that I think could maybe challenge for that job in year 1. So we finally reached the bottom of the barrel. The quarterbacks that I just straight up say with confidence are not good. It's going to get really ugly for some of these quarterbacks this year. We'll start with Iowa, which is fitting because I think a lot of you expected Iowa to be down here. Cade McNamara is their quarterback. He once started on a playoff team in Michigan. However, he's a system quarterback, and you take him and put him in a really bad system at Iowa, this is the result you're going to get. A quarterback that can't really play very well. And it's not entirely his fault. We saw him last season. Things weren't great. He got injured, and he missed the rest of the season. The offense was still bad. He's going to be bad again this year. At Pitt, it's a similar system and a similar question with Nate Yarnell as their best option at quarterback. Last season, their starting quarterback ended up converting to tight end because things got so bad. They're trying a philosophy change. Narduzzi's trying to evolve. They're trying to get a new offense coordinator in. No guarantees that it improves, and right now I'd say more likely than not, Nate Yarnell's going to struggle. At Wake Forest, they bring in Hank Bachmeier at quarterback. He was chased out of Boise State by Talon Green, who then himself ended up transferring. So at Wake Forest, Bachmeier, I don't know if that's something I'm crazy about. Alan Bowman was a liability at Oklahoma State last season. His numbers weren't too terrible, but he himself was a pretty big liability. He made some throws and some decisions that were really bad. I hope Oklahoma State can find a better option. We'll see. Right now, it's not looking like that's going to be the case. At Vanderbilt, the Commodores brought in a couple different guys to try and remedy things. They have Nate Johnson as one of their guys. It's not looking good. They lost A.J. Swan, which was really tough. That was a good future option for them. They're really sad to have that happen. Cincinnati's another team I'm not very optimistic about their season in general. Brendan Sorsby is going to be their guy. I believe he was the former Indiana quarterback. Things didn't work out for him there. Cincinnati doesn't have a great surrounding cast around him. I just don't like his odds of being a net positive quarterback. And that brings us at last to Northwestern. Brendan Sullivan and Ryan Hilinski are probably going to be the guys battling it out at quarterback. So another not ideal situation where you're probably going to be looking at an offense that doesn't have great quarterback play, but that's fine. David Braun showed last year they don't really need that to win games. Although I will say Ben Bryant had a pretty good end to the season last year. But there it is, our 2024 Power 4 tier list. A little long-winded, but I hope I was able to touch on everybody's teams and quarterbacks in a satisfying way to show you where my thoughts are before we watch these spring games and these guys dazzle us and move themselves up and down the tier list. But let me know down in the comments what you thought of this tier list, what you would move around, which teams you think are too high or too low based on their quarterbacks. And that is all I have for you guys, so I will see you guys later.